Hola! Today we're going to talk about the present progressive tense. So you might be asking, what is the present progressive? The present progressive tense in Spanish is something that we use to express what is happening in that very moment. So we're really emphasizing the idea that we're doing that action right now. In English, we form the present progressive by adding ing. So for example, we might say, I am speaking, or the boys are running. So we're going to look at some examples, but first it's really important to understand that in English we use the present progressive a lot, but in Spanish it's not used quite as often. So in Spanish we do not use it to explain what is happening in general. For example, in English we might say, this semester I am taking biology and PE. So we can see here that we've used the present progressive tense in English. We have the ing at the end of our verb, taking. In Spanish, however, we would not use the present progressive here because we're really just talking about, in general, this is what's happening. In Spanish, we would just use the present tense. So we would say, este semestre yo tomo biología y educación física. Another example, you could call up a friend and ask them, ¿Qué haces? What are you doing? And your friend could respond in general, voy al mercado, preparo la cena, so I'm going to the market. But if you're interrupting her in the middle of an activity and she's really trying to emphasize that she's doing that right now, she would use the present progressive. So she might say something like, estoy jugando los videojuegos. And by using the present progressive tense, we know I'm playing video games and I'm doing it right now. So how do we form the present progressive tense? There's two steps. The first part is that we use the verb estar, and we're going to conjugate it in the present tense. So just like we've seen, estoy, estás, está, estamos, estáis, están. Be sure you review where the accents are on estar if you need to. So we start with our form of estar, and then we're going to add the present participle of the verb that we are doing. Now what the heck is a present participle? The present participle is the ing form of the verb. So when we said, I am speaking, speaking would be the present participle, or the boys are running, running would be the present participle. This is also known as the gerund form of the verb. How do you form the present participle? So the first step, we drop the end of the infinitive. So we take off that AR, ER, or IR. And then, if we have an AR verb, we're going to add ando. And if we have an ER, IR verb, we add yendo. So it doesn't matter who we're talking about, we add ando or yendo to form the present participle. For example, an AR verb, comprar, we take off the AR and then we get comprando when we add our ending. This would mean buying. Comer, we can take off the ER and add yendo to get comiendo, which would mean eating. And escribir, we would take off the IR. Again, we add yendo, just like we do with our ER verbs, to get writing. So we can see that in English they have the ing at the end. This is the gerund form that we would use in the present participle, or that we would use in the present progressive tense. So here we can see some examples of the present progressive tense. Remember, there are two parts to it. We have our form of estar that tells us who's doing the action, and then we have our present participle. So the first one, estoy hablando, I am talking right now. Él está comiendo, he is in the middle of eating. Estamos escribiendo, we are currently writing. Or están estudiando, they are at this moment studying. So in English, in order to emphasize we have to add extra words. So we might have to say, we're doing it right now, or we're in the middle of eating, or currently we are writing. Instead of adding these extra words in Spanish, they just conjugate the verb in the present progressive tense. Vamos a practicar. So here's your chance to practice with some basic present progressive. So remember that you have to have the correct form of estar, so make sure you check your notes if you can't remember the verb estar, and then you also need to form the present participle of the verb. Go ahead and hit pause now to give yourself a chance to practice. Alright, let's take a look at your answers. So if we want to say they are camping, we would say ellos están acampando. So the ellos is technically optional. We could just say están acampando. Remember, the verb acampar is to camp. He is running. Él está corriendo. So make sure that you have your correct form of estar and that you add yendo. You are singing. Tú estás cantando. Now we would need to talk about irregulars. So are there any irregulars? Of course there are. So the first type of irregular that we're going to talk about are the stem, when the stem of an ER or IR verb ends in a vowel. And the change occurs in the ending, so it sounds the same. It still sounds like yendo, but the I is going to change to a Y. So this sounds kind of tricky, but let's take a look at some examples. So here we can see in the first row some infinitives that would fall into this category. So again, this category are verbs that end in ER or IR, and the stem ends in a vowel. So we can see here, if we were to take off our ER, the letter right before that is a vowel. This means that when we add our ending, we have to change that I to a Y, leyendo. Same thing with creer and with traer and caer. So if we take off our ER, we have a vowel right at the end of the stem. That means that the I has to change to a Y. Now this only happens in ER-IR verbs because it's this I that we're changing. So if it were an AR verb, we don't have an extra vowel right here that we need to change. The second type of irregular verbs are stem-changing verbs, and the only ones that we have to worry about are stem-changing verbs that end in IR. So if it is a verb that stem changes in the present tense and it ends in IR, it will also stem change in the present progressive. However, there are a few differences. So verbs that stem change that are O to UE stem changers, for example, dormir, it's going to change and it will only change from O to U. E to IE and E to I verbs will both become E to I verbs. Again, let's look at some examples so that this makes sense. So here we have our infinitives. We have dormir, and we know that the yo form of dormir in the present tense is duermo. It's an O to UE stem changer. But when we change it in the participle then, notice that the O only changes to a U, so we don't have the UE, it's just the U. So we change the O to a U in our stem, and then we go back and we add our ending for the present participle. So we end up with durmiendo. We could say está durmiendo. He is sleeping right now. Another example, competir, so this is normally an E to I verb. We can see that it changes to I, compitiendo. Decir and vestir follow the same pattern. Now these three verbs all happen to be E to I verbs, but even if it were an E to IE verb, this in the present participle would only change to an I. Now remember that these are just the participles. We still have to use them with the correct form of estar when we're using the present progressive tense. So now that we know how to conjugate regular and irregular verbs in the present progressive, what about reflexive verbs? So we've been talking about reflexive verbs, and we know that we have to put that reflexive pronoun somewhere when we conjugate our verb. And in the present progressive, we still have to do something with it. So we have two options. Our first option, we can place that reflexive pronoun before the conjugated form of estar, or we can attach it to the end of the participle, the present participle. If we attach it to the present participle, we have to remember to add an accent to the stressed vowel. And this is usually the third syllable from the end of our word. So let's look at an example. If we want to say, I am getting ready, and we're using the present progressive, we're really emphasizing that we're doing it right now. We know that the verb to get ready is arreglarse, so it's a reflexive verb. So we know that we want to use our form of estar, and our reflexive pronoun would be me. So we have the option to put it right in front of the yo form of estar. We could say, me estoy arreglando. So we've put it before the conjugated form of estar, and then we add our present participle. Or we can decide to attach it to the end of the present participle. So we would start with estoy arreglando, but now we're going to put the me right at the end of our present participle. Now remember that when we do this, we said we have to put an accent on the third syllable from the end, so the third vowel from the end. So we can see that we have 1, 2, 3 vowels. This is where our accent goes. Estoy arreglándome. So either way is correct. If you want to put it before, that's fine, or you can attach it to the end of the present participle. So that's kind of a lot of information, so let's take some time now to really practice and look back through your notes. So here you have some practice that touches on everything that we've talked about today. So it talks about the regular present progressive, it talks about the irregulars, so some that are stem changers, and some where the ending has to change to have a Y in it, and then some of the examples also have the reflexive pronoun. So really take your time and make sure that you look back through your notes when you're trying to write out these sentences. Go ahead and hit pause now to give yourself some time to practice. All right, let's see what you got. So the first one, we would say, estoy tocando el piano. I am playing the piano. So it's just a regular verb in the present progressive. It's an AR verb, so we add ando. Número 2. Él está encendiendo la luz. He is turning off the light. Again, just a regular verb in the present progressive. It's an ER verb, encender. So after we choose our correct form of estar, we take off the ER on encender and add yendo. Now number 3 is one of our irregulars. So it has our verb leer, which has a vowel right at the end of the stem. So that means that we have to change the I to a Y. And we end up with estamos leyendo. Número 4, again, it's your regular. It's one of our examples of a stem changer. So the O, remember, only changes to a U. It doesn't change to a UE here. So we get están durmiendo. Número 5, ¿qué estás haciendo? What are you doing right now? Y número 6, so here we have an example of using a reflexive verb. So we have the option to, remember, put it before the estar or to attach it. So if we attach it, we would end up with estoy cepillándome los dientes. Again, notice that we go 1, 2, 3 vowels back, and here